start?
Oh, that would be
Thank you.
perfect.
Thank
We'll
you.
send up some.
Okay, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Uh-oh. What that means for a person my age.
Oh, I probably have one. Mine first has everything but a pen that actually writes.
All right, let me see if I got an extra one.
The other has a pen.
I wouldn't, don't sweat it.
As long as I behave, we're in trouble.
No.
Okay. Okay, we'll call this meeting to order. Midwives Advisory Board meeting. First, we'll do the roll call. Meredith Rentz is absent. Brenda, absent. Janet,
Here.
Lori, here. Dr. Guillory,
Here.
Destiny,
Here.
Vicki,
Here.
Helen,
Here.
Dr. Nix.
Here.
All right, I'll sign it later. Okay, okay. Okay, the next agenda item, the approval of the minutes from our last meeting in December. Tamla, can I ask you a quick question? When we have public comment, is it written on the minutes? Okay, because we don't have any, I was just curious how it's noted and,
We would just have the board heard public comment from.
Okay.
With no public comment, there was no public comment.
okay, okay. Oh, wait, you did, okay, I see that. Okay. Everybody through?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Everyone? Okay.
Aye, mate.
Minutes accepted. Okay, and I'm going to move the public comment to the end. So if we can start with staff reports, licensing.
Good afternoon, advisory board members. Leonard Rivas with the licensing division. I provided you with the licensing statistics for fiscal year 2017, first quarter for fiscal year 2018, and December for fiscal year 2018, and then also January of 2018. And as most of you know, we are busy processing and approving the midwife renewals. The other updates that I have for you is this year, all midwife renewals are having a background check through the Department of Public Safety, and we're also checking the National Practitioner Data Bank on all renewals and initial applications. That concludes my report, unless you have specific questions.
Should we be worried?
I don't know, Janet, should you? I'll specifically look for yours.
Maybe I should exit now.
Okay. You have any questions about the report, about the National Practitioners Data Bank, the criminal histories that we're doing on renewals? No?
In terms of the new licenses
Yes, ma'am.
that have been issued, is this routine? Is that normal? Pretty
This
much
program
25 is
typically
low.
doesn't have a
New.
high number of new applications.
So this is regular,
Correct.
average?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
But it is going up, I see.
It is?
Yeah, I see that too.
Yes, ma'am.
Helen Nelson, the North Texas Midwives asked me to let y'all know that they had a lot of trouble this year getting their licenses, that they had to contact Yvonne lots of times. So I've done what they requested.
Ms. Nelson, do you know specifically what their issues were? Was it trying to log on online to renew, or?
I'm not sure. I think sometimes they couldn't figure out how to pay online.
On the online system?
Janet Dermeyer, I heard the same thing from East Texas. They were getting charged double, but I think Yvonne fixed that for them. And I know I had trouble getting on too, just because it's the program, TER, the program itself is just a little archaic.
Well,
So,
everything-
TER or Texas Online?
I'm sorry, Texas Online, trying to,
Okay.
that's not archaic, but trying to get on it was just, it's probably user lack of knowledge and training,
Because
probably more.
that
than
process hasn't changed since we moved over from DSHS to TDLR. It's still the same. Now, unless they created new accounts, that could be a
Yeah.
possibility. They already had an existing account and then they created a new one,
Yeah.
and that would create problems.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, on the North Texas Midwives Facebook site, they declared Yvonne a saint.
She is. She is. She is. We declared that a long time ago. It's well established.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Any other questions? No?
Leonard,
Yes.
if I could, Carla James, TDLR. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have knowledge of issues that came up during the renewal process, if y'all would please get with Leonard and let's figure out exactly what those are. If there is an issue, we want to fix it.
Yeah, Vicki Meinhardt, I have a quick question. So when somebody is going in for renewal, about how long does it take from the moment that they get their paperwork in and then it shows up as this person is licensed? So one of the things that some licensed midwives did have some difficulty with was they were getting their paperwork in by February 28th, but then online it says that this person is expired.
Right.
So my question here is that person really expired, or are they just pending approval? And is there a way online to reflect that midwife as who's gotten in her paperwork by that deadline,
Correct.
but y'all haven't had a chance to look at
Right.
it yet? Is there a way to change that from expired to pending approval? Because that was, I mean, that can be a little unnerving because it's public record. So if someone's out there looking for a midwife and they type in this midwife's name and they see that she's expired, when really she's just pending approval. So what's that timeline, and do we need to move that date up so that we don't have that, however long it is, 2-3 weeks of expired when really they're not?
So I would have to look at the VERSA database to determine if there's a different status they could go in if they paid. Typically, what we see with the midwife renewals is they'll pay online, but they won't send their documents till, a week or so later. And then a lot of them, what we're missing is the CPR card and the neonatal resuscitation card.
No, these are women that definitely got everything in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we would have to look at the database to see if there's something we can move them to, or possibly leave them active for a longer period of time until it's renewed. We could look at different options.
Yeah, I would appreciate that, because that was a pretty
Sure.
specific thing that came up, that, look,
Right.
I got everything in, but they haven't processed and now I'm
Correct.
coming up as expired and,
Yeah,
you know.
that's something we can look at.
Okay, all
Okay.
right, thank you.
Maybe Helen and Janet, if you guys can go back to your people and just find out what the specific issue is,
Right.
that would be.
That'll be great.
Helpful.
Be
Okay.
helpful.
Yes.
Okay, Guillory?
Yes, ma'am.
Just one quick question, and I'm not that great at math, so could you tell me how you get 93% renewed online, and
Sure.
then you have online renewal that
So
doesn't
what we
look like
do
that
is we
number?
take the online renewals
Mhm,
and
the
we divide
113.
that by the number of renewals issued, and that gives us the percentage of people that apply, renewed online.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I see that.
So the 113
Out of
divided by
120.
Right.
122.
Mhm. And then that gives you the percentage online.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Customer service.
Good afternoon, Board Chair and Chair. My name is Trey Seals. I am the Director of the Customer Service Division. And starting in December, we decided that it was time for the customer service to show up on the report for each board. So I'm here today to introduce myself and our division and explain and show some statistics of the work that we do for the agency and for your industry. So in our area, the Customer Service Division, we answer phone calls, and our goal is to reduce customer effort. And we are the heart of the agency. We have probably the most contact with the majority of the licensee population for the agency than any other division. And many of our folks do come in by phone. They also can email us. They also can contact us by social media, Facebook and Twitter. And they also do walk into our front office at our headquarters downtown. So we answer approximately 2,000 calls per day. We have about 400 emails per day. And I'll let that sink in a little bit. We're really busy. We have a staff of 51 dedicated individuals who are passionate about helping our industries and helping our folks get the status that they are working towards. We have several languages that our industries speak, our various industries speak, so that we have agents who can speak those languages as well. So Spanish, English, of course, Vietnamese, Chinese, Korean. So we do answer for those industries that have that need. Just a little bit about myself. I started with the agency in 2005 and came over from the Cosmetology Commission when that agency was moved over to TDLR. So I've been in this position of coming over new to a new agency and not sure what to expect. And but it has been a wonderful experience. It has been, just one session to another, growth and change, and that has been exciting. And we've learned so much about the industries that we support. We started out with about 9 people, so it was much smaller back then, and it has, just continued to increase. And we've done everything that we can to keep up with that and to keep up with the knowledge required to help with the industries. We, of course, rely on Yvonne for this industry as well. She is a saint to us. And so just to talk a little bit about statistics, we do have, as everyone mentioned, well, as Leonard mentioned in the previous report, an increase in contacts in the last couple of months, January and February, as you can see, for the renewals. And as you can see, most of our folks in this industry, we don't get that many contacts, but the ones we do typically lean more towards email, but they also do call. And so we are happy to introduce ourselves to you today, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just real quickly, what's the orange and what's the blue, sir?
Sure. The orange is the number of emails that we received.
Emails? Mhm.
Yes, ma'am. And then the blue represents the number of calls received.
Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're coming to the meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And any further
Anybody else?
questions?
I guess, Vicki Meinhardt here. So when you're receiving calls from, our people, especially around renewal time, I mean, what's the main subject matter that comes up, and why are they calling in? Because that might help sort of, inform, the licensing division
Sure.
about, what issues are coming up, and do you have a direct line of communication with that division to help them hone that up and
We do.
see what the problems are? Okay.
We do. So we have a role in our agency, in our division specifically called the Embedded Service Representative, and they do work both in our area but also in the licensing division area. And so as soon as an issue comes up, we do reach out directly. And then we do have folks on our staff who are more expert in the particular area. So in this case, we do have a team dedicated to the medical and health professions related programs. And so typically, if that kind of request does come in, it's usually they're new to the renewal process. It's a new site. It's, it doesn't look exactly the same. And so
Right.
we're there for the general beginning of the process. We don't get into any technical, but we are there to help with any pointing out information on the website or helping them know who they need to speak to within the agency to get a question answered. So we act as guides and translate a little bit in terms of getting people on their way towards getting the requirements met so they can get renewed.
Great.
In other
All
words,
right.
he tells them how to get in touch with Yvonne.
Sometimes, and if, depending on the question, we will definitely.
Well, that was
We won't
my-
even try.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what that was my experience last year. Was
Yes.
okay, well, let's just go to Yvonne, but it was all very new last year, so
Right.
I'm hoping some of the bugs have been kind of worked out
Yes.
this year
Or
around. So
we have a better understanding of the process.
I think
It goes
so.
both ways.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, yeah, definitely a little bit of both, but okay, good.
We're all learning.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
This is great, and thank you for bringing this information. The only other question is, as you collect the emails and information, the next thing is, how satisfied are your customers?
Good question. And is that
Speak to that if you like.
say one more time? Sure.
Good.
Carla James, TDLR. I'll give y'all an update during the executive briefing about our strategic planning process and explain that fully.
Very nice.
Nice
Thank you.
meeting
Good afternoon. Hello. On January 20th, number 115, maintenance of records, especially maintenance of records during a birth. On February 21st, Chairman Fremgen and Member Meinhardt did the absolutely fascinating midwife presentation. It was extremely useful. During the presentation, the two board members explained training, how they prepare clients, what a typical pregnancy under a midwife's care looks like for the client, and what kinds of emergencies or problems they face and how they respond to those problems. That was very useful. The enforcement attorneys and investigators and several intake people all attended and got to find out information to enforcement. There's always, since the beginning of school, discussed for penalty $500, collect the $500. May I answer any questions?
Janet Durmeyer, we heard of a case, and I'm from the San Diego area, that was maybe was some or over and
Still the case, and there are other we'll discuss.
well, they were fine. And so I'm on the enforcement committee, so I was
Yeah.
just kind of wondering why somebody on the board isn't involved in those kinds of cases when there's a case.
That specific case, we are in the process of obtaining expert testimony, but it is open and I can't discuss it because it's an open
Janet?
case.
Yes.
Mary Winston.
Yes.
It's just premature.
Okay.
Give it time. It's just premature. Insider information that we're still,
I'm hearing this report from the Houston area and from all over the state, so it's not quiet.
unfortunately, and it's not quiet, it's not great, but it's not necessarily completely factual or we don't have all that yet, just let us get there and we can discuss it further.
Okay, so my question isn't about that case. My question is about the board's involvement. We're supposed to be here to be helping. And I'm on the enforcement committee, and we haven't had a meeting since we did the matrix. So I didn't know, like, am I supposed to be a part of that process, or am I done with the enforcement committee?
You're-
Because we're here to help, and
You're not a part of that process.
Okay.
You developed the matrix, criminal guidelines.
was that the only purpose for the enforcement committee?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
But there's a process that we can definitely go over again as to how enforcement does intake and takes in cases and consults with, experts in that, in the different cases. It depends, it's definitely a case-by-case basis, but the enforcement committee at TDLR does not make decisions about enforcement cases. That's why we have the enforcement attorneys, the investigators, that whole
Sure.
staff. So,
And I'm not really talking about the outcome of
Mm-hmm.
it. I'm talking about that we know what we're looking for. And so I think we could be helpful in that process. And so, I mean, I actually have a lot of questions about that. And if you're telling me this isn't the appropriate place to ask those questions, because I have questions about the expert witnesses too. I'm thinking you have a midwifery board, and I'd like to think that we'd be a little more active, proactive in having any say on who those expert witnesses are.
you're jumping ahead a little bit
Okay.
again. That's okay. We're going to discuss a little later about an education summit.
Okay.
And we're still, you all are babies. And we're still growing and trying to, we're babies in handling midwives and midwifery. So in growing the program, we have some education to go on both ends, that needs to come on both ends. So questions that can't necessarily be answered here, definitely, because I know Karen is very poised but uncomfortable because it's an open complaint. But different,
Again, it wasn't specifically
No.
about that complaint.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I
But I
wanna know
know
what
you
roles
want
and stuff.
more of a role, or you want to know your role. We can explain that further. But also, we want to have we've come up with some possible dates. We've discussed this briefly with the Standard of Care Committee, but we're going to wait on that until we get to it. But that will be a way of further educating us and you guys and your profession in general about this process and other things just about the practice.
Okay.
Lori Fremgen, I think this area is probably the biggest adjustment for this board and for the midwives in Texas. It used to be a very public
Yes.
thing, and now it's not, and I think that's, there's just a lot of questions around it. That's,
Well,
yeah.
and we've been told a lot of things that we would be updated and we would have information about cases and things like that. And we know a lot of them have been settled, but we don't seem to really hear about them either.
Although we got two here,
Yeah.
so, or no, one.
I thought once a fine was assessed, then that case
Well-
was closed.
Carla James, TDLR, that is one of the end part of the process. But these things have to go in front of our commission as well. So what it sounds like is we may need to have our enforcement group come in and just give you kind of their process flow of how things work to provide a better understanding of where y'all come into the picture. And we did the advisory board training, but I think that was probably like drinking from a fire hydrant. If I had to sit in y'all's, I would have been starry-eyed after about an hour. We are more than happy to bring in our enforcement group and go through that process again with you if that will provide some comfort for you.
And
So we can do that at the next meeting.
And that's also, Mary Winston, we can definitely do that. Part of what we want to do, because we discussed in that fire hose drinking that you all had to do earlier, what's the final order? What's the settlement order? And so just because we have something, it may not be final, there's a time for appeal, and this can go on for 30, 60, and we can give those timelines. And enforcement may have a bigger report next time, sounds like. Not just about this, but just to kind of explain that. And so you don't have so much broad information and you can focus just on what this is. Because It just depends on where the case is. Yes, is there's an order? Is it a final order? Did they appeal? You know, so those are timelines that they're afforded by law, and we are bound to.
Which leads back to this case highlight. It doesn't say this is settled in here. Does it, if it came here to this board, does that mean that this case highlight that's mentioned here is settled and done?
Aaron?
Yes.
Okay.
The case highlight, Casillas, is closed. He
Okay.
paid a fine, we entered an order, and the case is closed.
Great.
Did you have any questions about this case?
No, only in regards to where, exactly where is it in the process, and
Okay.
we don't know, there's so many questions about other ones that, because we don't know what the process, where they are in that
We're going to
process.
cover that. We're going to make sure that that is a very targeted thing to discuss next time. I see Charlotte smiling in the back. So, yeah, that's not a problem.
Vicki?
Lori Fremgen, so you see that coming to the full board meeting?
Oh, just a discussion of the process
Yeah.
at the full board meeting.
Okay.
Because there's not clarity
Yeah.
100% about the
Okay.
process and what. And again, as Carla says, it was drinking from a fire hydrant.
Yeah.
So it was a
Yeah.
lot of information.
We're more than happy to,
Yeah.
to come back and
That'd be great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I know, I worked in enforcement for 3 years, and that's, you know, and as a lawyer, it's like, oh, it's just the process, but that's our crazy stuff
Yeah.
that we are required to abide by, but that needs to be explained.
Yeah.
What kind of order, you know?
Yes, Vicki Meinhardt, I would say that that clarity would be helpful. I mean, as a board member, I have been approached by a couple of women who've had complaints filed against them, and they're just like, we don't know anything, we haven't heard anything, how do we find out?
And Vicki, that's not, unfortunately, that's not going to change. They're going to come to you.
Right, and so my
And-
response has been, I don't really know,
Yeah.
and I don't even know if I can find out. And, you know, I just say, well, contact TDLR,
Yes.
and they'll be able to take it from there. So, you know, that's been my sort of pat response to that question. But, I mean, yes, some more education from y'all to us about how that works would be very much appreciated, I think.
Carla James, TDLR, if you will, if someone will just mention that for topics for the next meeting, so we are sure to get that on there. I've mentioned it to Tamala, but you all need to kind of make that determination, and I'm emailing the Director of Enforcement right now.
Okay, thank you.
And also, Vicki, Mary Winston, TDLR.
Yes.
That's going to be just, I don't want to call it a growing pain, but just kind of a growing, I don't know, I think of y'all make me think of babies, obviously. That baby trying to work its way out, you know what I mean? So, get out of here. So, it's new. Hey,
It is,
You know,
yeah.
so they're
Sometimes a little
accustomed
posterior,
to.
too.
Yeah, that's
I'm
right.
not even going to ask what you said, Janet. What'd you say?
I said sometimes it's a little posterior too, meaning backwards.
So,
Not on y'all.
okay. But, you know, they're accustomed to asking the board members. And
Exactly.
it's a new process. So
Exactly.
you're doing the 100% correct thing, telling them, contact TDLR.
Yeah.
And, yeah, because there are letters that come from enforcement, they're signed by, if it's the investigator, the attorney, you know, that's who they reach out to.
All right, well, thank you.
Janet
Nix.
Dermeyer, I have one more
Yes, Mr.
question,
Dermeyer.
and I hope
Then
it's not.
Dr. Nix has a question.
Excuse me?
Dr. Nix has a question after you.
Trying to get my word in edgewise. here.
Sorry. Go ahead.
So,
Go ahead.
I think the way that complaints were handled in our previous life is different than the way that complaints are handled in our current life, and we're coming from a different perspective of that, and I think not only do we need to understand that process better, but I think the midwives in general need to understand that process better. So I think I think it's a great idea to bring it forward again for the upcoming meeting, but there may be some sort of summation that can be have easier access for. Is there something on the website or someplace on the website that maybe describes the process?
I'm getting a nod. Charlotte, can I get you to come up? And one of our senior prosecutors, Charlotte Melder, will give us direction.
And so not only can we refer them to, to
There he is.
TDLR, we can refer them to this.
Hello, Charlotte Mulder. Yes, on the website, there is a part for filing a complaint, and there's a whole complaint filing process listed out there. And it talks about what happens and how we work the cases and how it works. But I completely second everything that Mary has said, that we give them phone numbers, we give them letters, we give them everything we can to get them to contact us so that we can work through these.
And now, Charlotte, that you've said that, it's about filing a complaint, and maybe a respondent is not thinking to look there. So maybe
Right.
that's
So
something
go-
we can improve on.
That's a
Yeah.
good point.
Forgive me if this is premature, but a technical question about complaints, is that considered open record? So if I get a complaint, do I get a copy of the complaint?
It depends. I would have to say, because of the health security of the Texas Medical Protection Act, et cetera, you may get a part of that complaint, you may not. You may get a redacted copy. It may be completely blocked. It would depend. I don't think that in any of our health-related programs, we send that out initially. Is that what you're understanding?
So we don't really have a right to see what the actual.
It's not that you don't have a right to, we're having to protect information.
This is Karen Cox again. There is a procedure, and a lot of this is a question of timing. You would be noted, every respondent is going to get an opening letter when they receive a complaint. Usually that will be from intake, and it says a complaint has been opened against you. Then, as needed, each step from intake to investigator to an attorney, there's more correspondence. You would be entitled to see the complaint if it goes to far enough in the process to where we could be sure we could put in place the procedures necessary to protect any confidential information. To the extent that you can't, it's because it is at a point in the process where we can't release it because the statutes, among other things, impose criminal penalties if we release medical information. So that would be why you wouldn't be given the whole copy of the entire complaint early in the process. If it goes far enough and we decide to initiate more serious proceedings, then yes, the respondents would be entitled to see it. But there's a procedural network, or a process that has to be in place before we can release that information, to protect it from the public, to make sure that confidential medical information from clients, and in your particular program, a lot of it is involving minors, minor children, babies. We have to protect that very carefully.
Destiny Hooper, with the opening letter that you send, could you send a procedural process flowchart so that they know what's to come next in the process, like a visual for them?
The opening letter, we would have to look into that. But the opening letter is essentially just notice that a case has been opened and gives a contact. And that person is encouraged to call that investigator to find out what's going on, because the investigator will also be reaching out to them. And at that point, the entire situation will be explained. The process is not the same for all of our cases, so it might be a little difficult to have that flow chart attached to that.
This is Karen Cox again, I want to repeat what Charlotte said and what Mary said. If someone comes to you and says that they've received a complaint, tell them to get the complaint letter and contact the person who signed it. Yeah. All of those letters, if it is, it will have a name and a phone number and an email address on it. We really want you to contact us. That helps the process go much quicker. It helps us get better information. There is no downside to having them call the intake person, the investigator, or especially if it gets to the point of going to a prosecutor.
This has been very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Education.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Lorraine Srofe, and I'm with the Education and Examination Division. You should have a copy of the report that we provided to you, and you will see that we have added 2 new employees, and we also provided the statistics for the jurisprudence exam on the second page. And I really don't have a lot of other information to share with you at this point, but I would be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Lori Fremgen, has the education work group met yet?
They have not, and I am already made a note to check with our director to see if that is in the process of being scheduled or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vicki Meinhardt, I'm actually the chair of that work group, and
Okay.
I am very curious when we're going to meet because
Okay.
there is work to be done.
Okay.
So I would really like an opportunity to get that work group moving.
He should be back in this afternoon. He's traveling in from San Antonio, but I already have a note to ask him when he gets back if that has been scheduled. And if it has, then you should have already been contacted.
No.
So I'm going to assume it has not been scheduled
No,
yet.
I haven't seen anything in my
Okay.
email. So
I will-
and I would certainly have to weigh in on any dates that were
Sure.
put out there. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely work to be done. So
Okay.
we're
I'll see if I can't help encourage
ready.
to
We're
get
ready.
that scheduled.
Sure. I mean, education work group, you ready? Yeah. Okay. Just weighing that in, okay?
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Yvonne Feinleib with Regulatory Program Management, which is our new name. Compliance Division has changed. We're now RPM.
What?
Okay.
Regulatory management.
So I think the name speaks to some of what we do. We try to communicate with all the different parts of TDLR and communicate with the advisory boards, communicate with our work group, and help everything to go smoothly. So you've got my report in the packet. Standard of Care Work Group is continuing to meet. Commissioner Butler attended by phone and talked with the work group about some of his concerns, and we may have a small revision to the informed choice form in terms of wording to make sure it's clear on the form what is the midwife and what is the client in one particular section. It's not a major change, it's just for clarity in one little bit, and that wording should not change any of the requirements or any of the meaning, okay? We do not have another standard of care work group scheduled at this time. The forms are translated and posted, and I've been helping licensing with the renewals, and I know that there have been some things that were confusing for people, and we will work on getting those things clearer for next year. I think everybody who paid has either gotten themselves renewed, or we have emailed them and told them, as in addition to sending letters, we've told them what they need. If there's anybody who is not renewed and is confused, they should call me directly, email me directly, I will help. I did want to put in one other thing about renewal. When you renew online, there's a place where you can attach documents. If you attach all the required documents, I can log in from anywhere with my computer and look at your documents and click the renew button. If I have to wait for them to come in by email, mail, or fax, they have to physically get to licensing, and I either have to be over there helping, or Vicki or one of the other licensing staff has to work on this program and match those documents to that online renewal and complete the process. So there is a way to make this a little bit smoother if they all come in as part of the actual online application.
Sweet.
Just as an FYI. Public outreach, Mary Hoffman and I got to go to Houston and talk to the midwives, and that was a very interesting meeting, and there were a lot of people there. big crowd, and I talked nonstop for like an hour. And then somebody is going to go to ATM. We had an invite to have a table. I'm not sure where we're at with that. The Association of Texas Midwives, the annual
I was like,
conference.
is she saying A&M University wrong? That's probably in Brian's office right now.
Okay, but it may not be me this year. It may be Mary Hoffman because she's going to be in that area. I'm not sure exactly what we're doing, but we have it on our radar. We have several different meetings on the same weekend, unfortunately, so we're trying to work around that.
RPM is a busy group. Sorry, Yvonne.
Yeah.
They are a very busy group. They do a lot because they do public outreach for all of our programs. So there are several of them that I jokingly want to clone.
Yeah.
They do a lot.
And then finally, you can see that we are still working on the Phase 2 transition from the Department of State Health Services. Even though they came over November 1st, there are still some issues being worked through, including with the massage program. So, and that's a big program, lots of people, lots of questions. But I'm available if you have any questions.
Thanks, Yvonne.
Okay.
Do you have plans to go to other parts of the state?
I
meet
went
with
to
other
Houston
midwives?
because they invited me.
Okay.
So if somebody wants someone from regulatory program management to come and speak to them, or somebody
Yeah.
from one of the other parts of TDLR, please invite us and give us dates.
Janet, perhaps the San Antonio midwives can do that. I think there's a lot of questions coming out of San Antonio.
Yeah, because
so-
we're happy to come, but we don't know when you're meeting, and we would never show up like uninvited.
Uninvited, right. Do you know if the Dallas
We meet the
midwives?
second Wednesday of each month, and we have a business meeting, a live lunch, and then a CEU program.
Are there questions up in Dallas that maybe Yvonne could come help answer?
We'll find some, because we'd love
Okay.
to have you.
Okay.
Okay. So if you have any other questions? Okay.
Oh, I have one more thing.
Sure.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I spoke with a midwife from the Rio Grande Valley area today, and she was very grateful about the Spanish translation of that document, and said it was excellent. And so I wanted to pass that along.
Oh, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
she was very happy to have that.
That's really good to hear.
Yeah.
We went out on contract for that translation, so.
Yeah.
Janet Dermeyer, Kelly Baumgartner and I are actually traveling down there to do a
Right.
little workshop with them. If there's anything you'd like, for us to pass on or something, we'd be happy to.
When are you going?
The 4th and 5th of April.
It's coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Couple of weeks.
Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, Yvonne. Executive.
Carla James, TDLR. The only thing I really have to talk to you all about is our strategic planning process. And you may have been through part of this at Department of State Health Services, but each state agency, every 2 years, is supposed to go through a strategic planning process where we're supposed to ask folks what they think about us, what can we do better, what would you change, and we take that very seriously here at TDLR. I've been through a number of them at other state agencies, and we're a lot more aggressive here. So you're going to see us around the state. We're heading out Monday, April 9th is our first one. We're going to 5 different cities. We're going to be in Arlington, El Paso, Houston, McAllen, and Austin. And what we'll be doing is asking a series of questions of anyone who attends, and we are actually doing this electronically this year as well for folks who live, in far west Texas and can't make it to El Paso or what have you. And we ask things like, what would you change? If you were king or queen for a day, what would you do? What can we do better? What do you see happening in your profession in the next 5 years and in Texas? So this is our opportunity to hear what the general populace thinks, not just our licensees, but it's out on our website, it's on our front page telling you where we're going to be. And this kind of harkens back to the question earlier of how do you know if you're doing well? And so we provide this opportunity not only in person, but, and you may have already received this email asking for you to participate in a survey. And I believe we sent that to 800,000 people in this state, so we're hoping for a pretty good turnout. we will use that data to put together our strategic plan, which is really our plan on what we think the legislature wants to hear about and what our licensees and the general populace want us to tell the legislature. So with this compilation of data, we put forward this strategic plan, as I just said, that is kind of a gathering of all the suggestions, complaints, what have you, and provide that to the legislative body. And that's how they start the process of making determinations of what changes will happen in law during the 86th legislative session. So that's really all I have to tell you. This is probably a little bit new to you all, I would imagine. Department of State Health Services has to do this, but they are so large, I'm not sure how much information they were actually able to put in their document as it relates to midwifery. The document is only about 25 pages long, so I cannot imagine where you all took up a large chunk of something of an agency that size. So you may see a little more information in ours related to your profession this time.
Lori Fremgen, I went to one of those strategic planning conferences, and it was great. It was really great. And
For the Department of State Health Services?
No, TDLR.
Oh, yeah, our
Last
forms
year?
that we had, the forms that we had before the transfer happened, they almost exactly mirror that.
Yeah, yeah. And I encourage people to go. It was very helpful.
Yeah, we take down all kinds of comments, good or bad, and then we sift through those. And, you know, some of the ones that someone may come and say, you should have complaint stuff on your front page. We don't have to go to the legislature to do that. So those are the kinds of things, if it's an appropriate change for this agency, we'll just make it. Sometimes while you're sitting in that strategic planning process, I am somebody, and then before it's over, it's changed. So this is our opportunity to really hear from people without asking everyone to call Trey's staff and make them all quit and run away. 800,000 calls would be a bit much.
He's new to this meeting. We don't want to chase him
Yeah,
away
we don't want to
yet.
run him off. That's
We'd
a
like to
vital
send at
part of
least
this
one more
agency.
meeting anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
We're well accustomed to meetings at this agency, so I'd be happy to entertain any questions you have about the strategic planning process.
Vicki Meinhardt, I'm sorry, did I miss is there a date that this meeting is happening in public?
We have Arlington and El Paso scheduled for April 9th, Houston and McAllen for April 16th, and Austin for April 23rd.
April 23rd, okay.
Yes,
thank
for
you.
Austin.
Janet Dermeyer, where will we go to get the actual exact locations?
If you will go to the TDLR's main web page, and and Tamala's already sent it to you because she's that good.
Well, for people who might be
Sure,
listening.
sure. It is on our main web page, and I'm trying to make the font less than 4,000 so I can see it. Okay, there's a little box on the right-hand side that says Feedback, Your Voice Matters, 2018 TDLR Strategic Planning. And it's got a photo of a couple of folks sitting in the audience. And that we have a whole page dedicated to that.
Great, thank you.
This is Guillory. In terms of strategic planning, I see that as planning for the next years, or the next 5 years, or whatever to come. What role does this board have in making suggestions from the board standpoint in terms of, for example, participation in other things in the state? And the reason I'm asking that is just recently an article came out, I think I can say it, where they showed in different states that where midwives work with physicians or work together, they have better outcomes by the state. And I'm sure you may have seen it or heard about it as well. So the reason I'm even bringing it up is because I think we do a great job in Texas, and there are things like the Maternal Mortality Task Force. I think we should have seats on all of these different things. So I don't know how you make suggestions about that, and how do we get that even in discussion?
Mary
Does that make
Winston,
sense?
some of it is, of course, beyond our authority.
Right.
However, when we gather, when we say, and Laurie was there, that we gather all comments, we gather all comments, good, bad, ugly, and we do have to narrow it down because strategic planning is a requirement. The requirement is to limit it to 25 pages. We have a lot of editing to do and still capture all the information that we gathered. But the information that we gathered is still there. It's public record, and our legislature and legislators hear you. So we don't have the authority. Yes, I've read that article, very good article. And yeah, thinking about a lot of things while I'm sitting here. But the maternal mortality task force, can't put you on that. Wish I could, but we hear you. And if that's something that comes out in strategic planning, that's something that we can put forth to the legislature so the powers that be can do it. It's really, I think we put forth 58 different initiatives, and we had 56 pass. So this is a time for us to, we really roll up our sleeves, and whatever you say, we really want to know what the body, I say the body, our licensees would have our state government know. So we are licensing and regulation, but we're here, and this is our time to get that word up. So that's something that whoever's listening here, but strategic planning is a perfect time to mention that kind of thing.
That's what I was thinking,
Yes.
because you see when they have the maternal mortality task force, like they may not even have a pediatrician on it, but I'm thinking a midwife should be representative on it.
Well, and
voices, so it's things that could be discussed.
And in light of that article, which is a very interesting and good article, and in discussing maternal mortality. So that's a subject that's very serious, and Texas has a very high rate as well. So come to strategic planning. You guys come to strategic planning. Your fellow professionals come to strategic planning. I jokingly say show up and show out. Not really, Janet, but show up. Show up and let your voice be heard, and I know you will.
I will.
Yeah,
You know
and we have it. It's on our website. We advertise as much as we can because we want you there. Because we'll have larger programs and people don't come, but we try. We really are there, and now we're incorporating this online aspect that if you can't physically be there, we can still get your comments. Those two will be incorporated.
Great.
Lori Fremgen, Dr. Guillory, that the people who were included in that task force, it was a legislative decision. It's like written into a bill.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we still can't participate as licensed midwives. We just
Absolutely.
weren't specifically named.
I understand how
Yeah.
they put you on there, but actually, even when you're writing a bill, that could be, those
Yes.
things can still be added.
Yeah, yeah.
They
Yeah.
just renewed it a second time, so they had a second opportunity.
Yeah, we did make an attempt to get on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Janet Dermeyer, so there's no stakeholders on the strategic planning? Is that all government?
Well, at Carla James, TDLR, we consider everyone who talks to us a stakeholder, quite frankly. So this is simply TDLR staff going and gathering the information. And so anyone who's willing to speak to us or send in any kind of a piece of data, suggestion, comment, they're a stakeholder to us.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's all I've got.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, agenda item F, that is the work group reports. And the standard of care work group met one time since our last full board meeting. Yvonne covered most of it, really. We were just tweaking some unclear parts of the informed choice document. And then also Karen mentioned that Vicki and I came to do a day in the life of a midwife, and hopefully she said it was helpful, and we genuinely hope that was helpful and are available for continuing support in that area. So, and that was our last meeting.
Great meeting.
Yeah.
Commissioner Butler participated via telephone, and I really felt that that was a very good, I'll say one-on-one, but a smaller group to kind of give some of his concerns, which really weren't major. The tweaks to the informed consent document are not substantive in nature. It's just clarifying. So just having that conversation was good.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. I was really happy that he reached out and that we were able to answer the questions that he had.
And for other members of other work groups, that time, I mean, this came sort of out of the blue. It was a reach out from a commissioner who had a concern, and we had the work group come in and address that concern. So we were able to get to hear some on the phone, but we were able to actually address that concern. So if another work group is called, we know you will show up and do the same thing. But those kind of things aren't necessarily planned. It just came, and we tried to schedule it, and it worked out well.
Yeah. It was great.
I would concur.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any questions about?
And Vicki Meinhardt here, I would reiterate that, if further education is necessary, I think Lori and I would be more than happy to come again. And if there's questions at all, happy to share that information if it makes your job flow a little easier and informs you in some of these decisions that you're having to make, then that's to the good of everyone.
Yeah.
I think any of us would.
Yeah.
What's that?
I think any of us would.
Yeah.
Happy to help.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. All right. Agenda item G, discussion of resources for the Texas Electronic Registry and concerning critical congenital heart defects.
Yvonne Feinleib again, Regulatory Program Management. So Mary asked me to come, and I was going to send you guys an email, and she wanted me to come and present a little information. So the Texas Electronic Registry problems are going to be solved according to the DSHS website by January 1st of next year. And this summer they're going to have training and rollout of their new system. They have system requirements up on their website. They have a lot of information out there. So if you haven't been contacted directly, you might want to get with DSHS and see when, you know how they have those regional offices, see when things are rolling out for your area and track it that way. Having them come here and speak is not really TDLR's role. In other words, we don't need to change any of our rules to facilitate filing birth certificates through a different system. If there are changes to the way birth certificates are filed, you're already required to follow those rules because our law just says you have to file them in accordance with the laws and rules that govern the filing of birth certificates. So if you have questions or concerns about the process, the new system, everything, those should be addressed as individuals, not as a board or as board members from TDLR, because it's not TDLR's responsibility as an agency, if that makes sense. So I can send you that link so that you have it. I know sometimes it's hard to find things on the DSHS website when you're trying to target something, and since I have a lot of comfort with that, I'm happy to send that.
Yvonne, I'm sorry, what was the date again?
January 1st, 2019 is
Okay.
when they say it's going to roll out. The system is called TexEver, big T, little x, capital EVER. And they have a go live page. I was just looking at it to make sure nothing had changed right before I came up. And you really want to think differently about some of these health initiatives because we aren't part of the Department of State Health Services anymore. And so there was a lot of kind of overlap, right? I worked for the agency. All of the staff who supported you and did everything worked for the agency when you were aboard there. And so everything was kind of our business. right? Here, the business is really TDLR's business, licensing, renewals, regulation, rules, all the things that we need to do our little piece. And that piece over at DSHS is not really TDLR's job to tell them how to do their stuff. Does that make sense? We're not part of that organization. And so it's important to think of that as an association issue and an individual issue, rather than that TDLR should get them in here and make sure that they do things the way that we want or need. Does that make sense? Because we, as a licensing agency, don't actually make those rules, support those systems. It's a disconnect mentally. It doesn't mean we shouldn't care. It doesn't mean it shouldn't go well. But that's not really for TDLR as another government agency to be doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a little, Lori Fremgen, it's a little unfortunate because it would be nice if there was some more communication between the two agencies. I'm not saying that there's not, but just in terms of what we're talking about here and the benefit that we could gain from gathering this information and asking questions.
And I think that benefit can still be gained by contacting DSHS directly as an association, as a local group, saying you need someone to come and speak to your group, give you materials. I mean, DSHS traditionally likes to do outreach, but doesn't always have the electronic tools we have.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Janet Dermeyer, and just for anybody listening to, they have a online conference, and I did it, and I, they're really enthusiastic about the new program, and so it kind of made me enthusiastic too. So I think they're really trying very hard to get that more updated and easier to use. And I've had need to call TER, and I've found it the improvement on it has been astounding, actually. So I think they're working real hard at meeting our needs.
Right.
I'm excited to see the new program.
Excellent to hear, and I hope you can find a way to direct that to them so they get some of those kudos. Kind of the same thing with the Critical Congenital Heart Defects Initiative. There's a website at DSHS that specifically talks about the requirements. It has links to the rules. It has an extensive FAQ page. And I will send that to all of you also. But again, this is something related to requirements that we are not administering. And if that changes, in most cases, that will not in any way change our law and rules, if that makes sense. There are a lot of other laws and rules that midwives have to comply with that TDLR is not responsible for making. So we may sometimes put some information in our Texas Midwifery Manual to help new midwives coming to the state know exactly what all these other requirements are, but we aren't going to be implementing those things directly. Those other agencies will be implementing. Does that make sense? And so I'm going to send you an email about all that, but I just wanted to make sure I kind of laid that out because it is different from DSHS. We were all a part of DSHS. If you were on the old board, you were appointed by the commissioner of DSHS and accountable to him or her, right? And so it was just a different world. Does that make sense?
In addition to that, I think they have the Texas Healthy Steps as a module for CCHD, because we
And it's
helped
free.
write it, so
Free
it's very
CE.
good.
Oh, you did, thank you.
Under
Yeah.
newborn screening.
Yeah, there's a lot of free CE through DSHS if you go looking, actually. Something to know. Any other questions?
I have one question.
Sure.
Do we know if the CCHD information is in the manual, and what work group is responsible for that manual?
I can double check it for you, and Standard of Care would probably update it.
Okay.
I believe everything was reviewed before we did the translation.
Right.
Typically, there's a very small amount of information in there.
Yeah.
Because we don't want it to get out of date and have to go retranslate it and everything. But we can definitely look at that at the next Standard of Care if you want me to put it on the agenda.
We don't need to.
Okay.
That's okay.
Janet Dermeyer, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but are they do you know if they're changing any of the substance of TER as far as, like, they had some questions on there, like the one about did you attempt a vacuum extraction and it failed? Which, how do you answer that question? Are they changing any of the questions and the information on there? Do you know?
I don't know.
Who could we call and ask that question?
You'd want to call them. You'd want to find out what is being included as
Well,
questions.
their help desk wouldn't be able to answer that question.
Probably
so-
not, but they could probably get you to the right program specialist. You could start with the regional guy also, whoever your regional person is. And they might also have a good contact for you. Because I know it's sometimes hard to reach people
Yeah.
because they're traveling and stuff.
Thank you, Yvonne. I mean, I have a feeling that there's going to be continued clarifications as we go forward, because even though TDLR is not responsible for these rules and those laws regarding, you must file a birth certificate and you must do the CCHD, and that's all under DISHIS, ultimately, we have to follow those rules. So there's just natural crossover. I mean, midwives are being essentially ruled by two agencies. Even though our licensing regulation is here, we still absolutely must file birth certificates. We absolutely have to go through this system, and there's going to be a lot of questions about that system, and so.
And there are so many things that midwives have to know, all the information
Right.
about the AOP, all the information
Yes.
if they have a birthing center.
Exactly.
I mean, there's so much.
So much,
I'm-
and we're
I'm
just-
not-
and
I'm not
we're-
saying that's not true.
Yeah.
They're putting
yeah.
AOP on the birth certificate.
Well, there we
With
go.
TDR.
So
Combine the
there's.
two. I'm excited about that one.
Yeah, so I think continuing updates, and just answering questions and having that information available for midwives is going to be helpful, help us follow all those rules that we have to do.
And I think this is also a place where the association can play a really important
Yeah.
role.
Yeah.
Historically, when you look at the licensing board and you look at the association has a huge role to play.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's an opportunity there also to have those conversations with DSHS and with other agencies as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think so too.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Anything else?
Thank you.
That's it. Okay. Now, agenda item H, discussion of the Midwifery Education Summit.
So, Mary Winston with TDLR, and we discussed this a little bit in the standard of care meeting that we had, because after we had our actual meeting, we just chatted for a while, and I learned some more things, and we were talking about an education summit, not just about cases. Yes, if there are final orders that are properly redacted and whatever we have to do, if it's final order, we'll have more discussion on that next meeting, the things we can discuss. But midwives are so much more than just an enforcement case, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we were in that meeting, what was the term you used, Laurie? Was it physical distress versus
Oh, yeah.
emotional?
Anxiety that gets expressed, and is the base of it an emotional base or a physical kind of life-threatening?
Yes.
Yeah.
As an example, and I thought, oh, that's very good. Having been through labor a couple of times, I know that that's a real thing.
Yes.
And how do you determine that? And that's something that at least a couple of you voiced that, oh, maybe we could do that better. So I was thinking, that's a topic we could discuss. We've tried to get the water birth discussion in. It just hasn't worked out yet for one of our meetings. But for a summit, that could be something also that could be discussed. So we want to take, yes, an enforcement aspect, learn from that, but other topics we want to take and make part of this summit as well. So it'll be a real learning tool. Right now, we're taking suggestions. We are looking at a date in August. We have several dates available, and hopefully this will work out because we need all of you here, if at all possible. We've also come up with some new information, Dr. Guillory talking about maternal mortality, and there are different topics that are really relevant and that need to be discussed, and we don't want to shove it into an agenda item on a meeting like this, but we want something that we can really have a discussion on, and maybe a learning opportunity for everyone involved. I'm up for, and we're up for suggestions on other topics. We know we want the enforcement component as far as a final order and anything we can present there. We want to discuss the anxiety versus physical distress during labor. We want topics, and we want you guys to give us that input. You don't have to give it to us today, but we would like you to email it to us or call us with it so we can flesh out an educational summit for midwives.
That's awesome. Thank you.
So, and we hope by pushing it out to, we can go as far as August 27th in the month of August to do this. And we have several other dates available. Would you like to maybe pick one of those dates today, and then you can email us with topics that you think we can add and kind of help us flesh out this summit?
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Lori Fremgen, one is it just for the board, or is it open to all midwives?
This will be open.
Okay. And then who do you see leading these topics?
This is what I need your help with.
Okay.
Because even when we discuss the anxiety versus physical distress, my first thought was, what studies have we had on that, and who could we get? I mean, we would love to get, eventually I want this like to be a wonderful tool. Okay, we're starting out slowly, don't quite know exactly what we're doing, but we're planning, and we know we want everyone to learn something. But we have to have foundational basis for the classes. TDLR can do, or for the instruction, TDLR can do the enforcement piece. TDLR can discuss in cases that are final that it's possible for us to discuss. Our process can be discussed, things like that. But there are other things in the midwife community that need to be discussed, and we need the board to tell us. If it's not going to be in this open meeting that you tell us, then please individually send us emails. And anyone who's watching via YouTube or online at our website, we want this information. We'll bring that back to the board to settle on an agenda. So I guess this is kind of a project, but and we're thinking that if we push it out until August, we'll have time to at least get a day's worth, several hours worth of relevant instruction.
Okay.
Janet
Yes.
Dermeyer, I have a question. So I'm trying to be clear about what, is this going to look like a conference where it's actually going to be a teaching? Or is it going to be like a panel discussion where there'll be open discussion between midwives and instructor?
Maybe a little of both. I mean, really.
And will there
we
be a
want-
fee involved?
I'm sorry?
Will there be a fee involved?
No. We're not looking at a fee. But we want to get, you all had an educational piece when you were at DSHS, and it was the enforcement cases. Well, that's great. We want to do that as well, and not violate any HIPAA rules. But, you know, just having that conversation, there's so much more than that we could discuss. We don't want to charge you any fees. We want to, you know, we had some great input from a couple of your board members. And I know, Janet, I mean, how long have you been doing this? I know you could have
Since
some
dirt. A long
great
time.
input as well, but we need to kind of develop an agenda for the day so we can have a morning session, afternoon session. And this is something new. TLR's never done this. We've had other types of summits, but not necessarily an educational summit like this, to my knowledge. I haven't been here but 5 or so years. But we need the board's help in what to include in that summit. We know we want an enforcement piece. We know we want education there. But what else do we need? Because when we had our standard of care meeting, you know, the common thought was, oh, this is something that we could, you know, learn, and maybe some of us could do better.
Okay. Lori Fremgen, Janet's been around since the scrolls were written. No.
It's the pick on Janet day. It's okay. I got
We
tough skin.
love you, Janet. That's why we pick on you.
But she was just a baby when I started catching babies.
That's right.
Just to clarify.
And then, Are CEs available? Is that something we've considered?
We have considered it,
Mhm.
and we're looking into it. I got a phone call from our director of E&E, Education and Examination, this morning, before I even got in the office. And I put that bug in his ear, and where is he? Oh, he's back there. Hi, Ray.
Carla James, TDLR. I will tell you that depending on when we have this summit, will play a factor into that, because there are certain kind of hoops, as you're well aware of, to jump through before you can provide continuing education as a provider. So I think there's a little bit of background information we're going to have to gather up on our side and some research before we can make that determination.
It'd be great if we could, because it's one of the enticing things that brings people.
Sure.
So,
and I will say that we are going to do some research, because once we open that barn door, midwives aren't going to be the only one that want to come through it.
Yeah.
And every profession that we license is going to want to have that. So if you'll just bear with us to do a little bit of research.
Yeah.
And that was the E&E director, Ray Pissarro, that conversation this morning. He, of course, talked about the rules, and we talked about, he's the expert in that. And so we'll figure that out on this end.
Okay.
But we really want, when, you all came over to TDLR, there was concern that that piece was missing.
Right.
So we have that piece, and it's still not quite comfortable. We're still trying to wiggle through, but there are also other things that we can add to that piece to be helpful. So let us work on that and see what we can do, and then help us plan.
Okay.
the
Do you
summit.
have maybe a deadline to gather topics? It might be nice for us to reach out to the midwives across the state
Yes.
and see if.
We have time, and I'm going to, I haven't mentioned this to Tamla, but she's given me like so many stickies since I've been sitting here on different things, and different dates and deadlines. So we can come up with that,
Okay.
and we can get that to the board.
Okay.
So that will give you some leeway into reaching out and figuring that out.
Okay. Great.
Will it be held here or somewhere else?
Tentatively, yes. We're anticipating having it here.
Okay.
Janet Dermeyer, I think I can say it, the majority of midwives, I think, would be real excited about having an opportunity to work together on a project. I think that's good. I think from what I hear, it seems like the frustration among midwives just in general is lack of understanding and lack of communication, which is kind of hard to do. And so I think midwives want to be heard too about what our hopes and dreams are, and what our frustrations are, and what it seems like isn't working, and why isn't it working. Sometimes there's a legitimate reason why it's not working, because we're changing and we're moving on. But sometimes that's not always understood. So I think it would be very enticing for the midwives at large to come to a place where they're going to be heard as well, because we have lots of educational opportunities. We have the Association of Texas Midwives has an annual conference. We have an annual cruise conference. That is a plug, by the way.
That amazed me. That was wonderful. I was like, there's a cruise?
But
Did
nobody
you get
pregnant on the
education?
cruise, right?
Oh,
Y'all aren't-
we're hoping they will. Yeah, because we'll be there for them next year. Yeah.
So
No,
Carla,
but education but the
Yeah.
communication and working together kind of validates both of us, in a way, so that we can better understand where each other's coming from and what our frustrations are, like I said, and because we've got to figure out that space in there where we can merge and come together and work together, because we'll make it better for everybody. And what our frustrations in the past have been, as far as the openness of the complaint review, was that was very educational. We felt like it made the midwife better, which made the community better, which was what we were commissioned to do. We were commissioned to make midwifery safer for the consumer. And so the part of the frustration is, how do we maintain that piece? Because coming here where it's black and white, licensure is a little bit more black and white the way it's perceived, and so it's more of a slap on the wrist, which doesn't really necessarily make the midwife better, and it doesn't necessarily make the consumer safer. So how do we get to that point where the emphasis is still on making the consumer safer?
I think there's two ways to do what you're talking about. There's probably a lot more than that aren't coming to me right now, but the part about enforcement, let's get this training back in for y'all so you can see our process, and that may ease some of the concerns that I'm hearing right now. And if not, then we talk about it. And then I keep going back to strategic planning, and I may be sorry because I may be inviting every midwife in the state to send thousands of comments as I move my lips right now, but this is the exact way for us to get this information. Is, people be dedicated and vigilant to submitting information to our agency so that we can review it, because again, you go back to that, I can't fix it unless I know it's broken. I can't make it better unless I see a suggestion that tells me that it needs to be made better. I mean, we're not assuming that we're 100% perfect. No one should ever assume that, but we work really hard to do what we do so well. So we need to hear that information, and this is a tool for these organizations to go out and the people who are part of those organizations and say, oh, wow, I didn't know this existed. Let me submit my information. And again, I may be sorry I said that. I may be working till midnight or 1 a.m. for mornings and mornings and mornings to get that information. But we only do this every 2 years, and we're actively seeking their input. And that's not to say we only do it once every 2 years, but this is a prime opportunity to do so.
But again, everybody who's listening on live stream, we want to be able to serve those communities that don't have any obstetrical care offered to them. There's a lot of them in Texas, over, we say 153 counties. I just read an article yesterday that 50% of the counties in the United States has no obstetrical care. That's half of the United States. Women don't have that option. Midwives go to all those counties. We like to travel. Well, I like to travel, but we do. We go to those counties and stuff. So, if we will, this is our opportunity. So I want to say that publicly. This is our opportunity because y'all have opened a door for us to come and make our statements and make our claims and work together, because that might be the very thing that make the state see our value in those places where there isn't anybody but midwives. And we really are and we think we're doing a really good job too, especially in those underserved areas. And then see that value may really improve our ability to work together in the future. So then when we have things like disasters, they actually put us on that, first responders list.
Yeah, I mean, people have
'Cause they'll
babies
see
all the time, so you don't get to pick the weather for your baby. So, I will say, if y'all can do us a huge favor by telling your organizations about this, please.
Done.
And it closes. I don't remember the exact date that it closes, but there's that opportunity to submit the information. Y'all can be our voices as well, and we would appreciate that.
Great, thank you.
So, Mary Winston, we will contact you. It'll probably be an email from Tamala with a time frame to gather information. And you all have, actually, you previously scheduled your next board meeting at the last meeting. And we're just going to do ongoing discussion of the summit and what it's going to look like, and to develop that.
That's great.
Yeah, Vicki Meinhardt here. Just sitting here, I've managed to jot down about 7 different topics. So, I think we can have a lively conversation about different things that we can talk about. I'm excited. This is going to be good.
That's good.
Janet Dermeyer, I think we probably ought to pick a date. What your question was earlier,
Yeah.
should we pick a date? And since we all have babies due at really odd times, the further out we can plan that date, the better.
I'm trying to think what month it is. Okay, we're looking at August,
Yeah.
and we have the 20. I'm going to go backwards. The 27th, the 20th, 13th.
Those are Mondays.
Mondays.
They're all Mondays.
And we have the week of August 6th through 10th.
I'm very open right now for August. The only week that doesn't work for me is the very first week, and you didn't even mention that. So there we go.
It seems like maybe earlier in the month, just because of school.
Okay. We're open. That full week of 6th through 10th is available. So
Okay.
is the 6th on a Monday?
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's
It's
the
the
Monday.
Monday. Mhm.
That's you can't do Victoria?
I can do that.
Okay, okay.
I don't know, what about you, Dr. Guillory? What's your,
I'm sorry, I don't get it's an academic July starting, so I won't even get my schedule until July.
Okay.
So we just have to go with the flow and make it work.
okay.
Is it August?
Thank you.
What?
So,
Well, it looks like almost every Monday in August
It
was
is.
mentioned,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That first week, it's just the week.
And it's the whole
And-
week.
yeah.
Okay.
and if we did the,
Is that a good day to get other midwives to come in? I think it's very important to be able to be
Yeah.
open and feasible for others. And I'm just going to pitch in one more time. I know CME is hard. I know it's 6 months, or CE, whatever you call it. I know it's 6 months before the date, but I guarantee you, whatever way you could work, it would be great if you want someone to come all day and be able to participate. It would really be great if you could get
Yeah.
credit for it.
We will
Yeah.
put forth that effort.
yeah, it may be, I don't know, is it better to have this after school starts so the little ones are already in school all day? I mean,
I don't think so.
because that would be closer to the 20th. I don't know.
That's the young ones.
Yeah, that's the young
Yes,
ones.
Midwives have lots of child caregivers.
True that. So, okay.
And the schedule of school, then you got to go pick them up, and I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Should we say maybe the 6th or the 13th?
Yeah, either one of those dates would work.
Yeah,
Either
for
one?
me too.
The board?
The
had,
6th?
6th or the 13th? What do you
wanna
like?
Take a vote on the,
Shall we take a vote?
Let's take a vote.
People?
Okay.
How about the 6th? We'd like the 6th. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, I'm good with either one. It's
Okay.
easy.
Why don't we
Yeah.
just do the 6th?
Okay, done.
you're on the schedule. I saw
That was
Tamala's
easy.
pen moving.
Okay, she's on it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And this will be ongoing. And
Thanks,
we will
Mary.
reach out and give you a date and anticipate a lot of really great suggestions.
Mhm.
And then this board will work on how this agenda will flow. We will work with how it can best flow for staff, and we'll do this.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary. That's
Okay.
exciting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so
Yeah.
exciting.
Okay, agenda item I, discussion of license holders' record-keeping requirements. I
So,
believe I
I
requested
was
this,
going to
didn't
say,
I?
Laurie, this was your request. We just
Yeah.
worded it a little differently, but this was your request if you want to
Okay.
start that.
I want to get to where that rule is. Read it. Maybe I can set a little context. We've had a couple of midwives die in the state, and the question is, what do we do with their records? The clients still need to be able to access them. But I don't believe we have anything specifically determined in our rules.
Where is that rule?
We do have in the rules, Mary Winston, TDLR, how long the records are to be maintained, we have that. But to address, I mean, what if something does happen to the midwife?
Yeah.
Laurie, I think, had worded this a little differently, and we just went back to the rule.
Mhm.
Something to discuss. Is this an issue? If we have a midwife pass away, before these timelines are up for her to maintain these documents, is there something that is commonly done? We don't really address that in our rules.
Right. I actually went to the HIPAA law and looked up what their recommendation was. And it says that the patient records still must be maintained for the time period required by the state law, even if the physician who creates them retires or dies. And the records must be accessible to patients and their personal representatives for as long as they're maintained. And then it goes on to say, the law in many states outlines specific requirements for handling patient records in the event of a provider's retirement or death.
Okay,
So, that's,
some guidance.
yeah.
Yeah, so this, I think we discussed maybe needs a plan or something. Maybe nothing, I'm sorry, General Counsel is saying work group?
Yeah,
I think I stole his microphone, I'm sorry, Brad.
yeah. I was wondering if it needed to go to the work group, and then, of course, which one should we send it to? Is that me? My work group?
I think so. I think so, Lori. I think we have to tackle this.
Or
Because,
should it be for licensure? I mean, as part of your license, you have to maintain that stuff.
no,
The standard of care.
I think it's rules. I think we have to come up with a way to figure out what to do with records, to
But
still
that's not
abide
standard
by.
of care, that's rules.
But still, we have to.
Licensure, wouldn't that be part of licensing?
Does it matter?
It's,
Okay, we're
Everything doesn't.
saying it's part of licensure?
you want to take it?
That's the debate. Is it part of licensure or standard
is
of
it?
care work group? And does that
What
matter?
say you, midwives?
Does it matter?
What was some standards of
I'm
care
saying we could
because they
spread
meet
out some of the
regularly
workload.
into it.
I know, we got a flow going.
This is also, I see some itching to jump in here. Standard of care does have a lot. And being not a midwife, I think it's standard of care. If you want another group, then it would be an ad hoc group to handle just this one issue, or it's just, I see Ms. Nelson shaking her head. This would just go to standard of care.
Okay, all right, let's just send it to the standard of care work group then. I think
So
that's simple.
unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, we have discussion and we don't have assignment of work group. So we have discussed it, we're not gonna make any further
Oh.
assignment
Oh,
yet.
okay.
But be thinking about it.
Okay.
Because we have our next meeting scheduled. This gives the work group some individual time to work on this, and to come together after that. We will put this on the agenda.
Yes,
To
let's put
assign
that
it.
on my list, yeah, okay. I should have been specific in my request.
We're still learning.
Goodness. Okay, agenda item J, recommendations for agenda items for the next board meeting. Tamala, do you have those two that we talked about? Enforcement process review and assigning the records keeping rules writing to a work group. Thanks.
This is Brad Bowman, General Counsel. I just wanted to mention that the package of rule changes that the Standard of Care Work Group has been working on very diligently for some time, that will be ready for the full board to consider and potentially vote on at your next meeting. So
Awesome.
That's exciting.
Great.
And
Will
then
we get it beforehand to read it?
we will send it to the board in advance with your materials.
Question, Vicki Monhart here. Will we also have the updated ICA with us a little bit of semantic changes ready for the next board meeting to look at as well, and just,
Oh, does that need to go, even
or is
need
it
to go
going? I
through
mean,
the
what are we
board?
doing with that? Is it just going to change and that's
It's
what's going to
not
happen?
substantive, the informed consent.
Yeah.
It's not substantive. The way it was written, we all understood it.
Yeah.
But someone, and you know, you have to get fresh eyes. So when Commissioner Butler put his fresh eyes on it, it was written in two different persons. So it was, we kind of shifted from the midwife to the client. Totally clear to us all here, but once he said it, I'm like, oh, okay, I could see that. So it's not going to come back before the board because we're not really changing anything other than making it clear as to who we're talking to.
Okay.
That was his only concern, and
Right.
I just didn't even see it. Did y'all see it before we had the meeting? I did.
Not really.
I just, yeah.
Yeah.
But my question is, I guess, when is that going to go? Do we know when that's going to go up and be ready for the
We had
public?
someone to volunteer to kind of tweak that.
Okay.
I don't have a date yet on when it's going to go up.
So maybe we'll have a date.
But
Well, then-
maybe we'll get a date. Because
Okay.
it's rewording. But just that much, that form I thought was great, and I still think it's great. But until Commissioner Butler asked that question, I totally didn't see it.
Yeah.
So we just have to change that.
Okay.
And, you know, I think we should have it definitely, if not before the next meeting, I'm pretty sure before the next meeting. But we can bring that back and just, you know, get a look at it for our next meeting.
Yeah, because essentially, as soon as that changes, every midwife in the state of Texas is
That's
going to be
right.
responsible for shredding the one that she has
Yes.
and instituting this new one. So I just want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to let all, even though it's just a little no substances change, we're still responsible
Yes.
for making sure, and that's just something that could, it has the potential
Yes.
to totally fly under the radar. Like, we
So-
have to
Yeah.
be really loud about letting the midwives know, hey, this just changed.
Yes.
You have to change it in your records, or
And
you're going to
so
not be in
our
compliance.
notices that we normally do, we'll make sure if it's FAQs, or we'll get with the team, the RPM team and the web
Great.
team, and make sure that we get this notification out.
Excellent, thank you.
Sounds like next meeting is full.
I guess so.
And then, of course, further discussion of the Education Summit.
My next, have a, as we're looking at some of these substantive changes that are going to be coming in, and educating midwives about that, we have brought up ideas of creating FAQs or something specific about those educational changes. And some of that may be related to some of those FAQs are probably, it best come from a midwife board, and we have educational, so we can't assign something to their meeting, but we may want to think about having the education's
To look at those?
education look at those changes and create some sort of FAQs that summarize or help teach about those changes.
Right.
That's
I've
on
been-
my to-do list, Dr. Nix.
Yeah,
As
I've-
soon as
I've
we
been-
start meeting, it's,
All right.
And did I give you my list? I've been keeping that running list,
you've shared some of it with me, but clearly we have more,
perhaps.
perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah,
Okay.
there's a running list of things that need to be managed by
Thank you, Dr.
education.
Nix.
Okay.
It sounds like an excellent topic at the Educational Summit to me.
Yeah, yeah, that could be another place to do it too. Mhm. Yeah.
When is our next meeting? Is our next meeting before that educational summit?
I
May
think that's our
14th.
next agenda item.
Yes.
I thought we had already created our next meeting, but,
On the
Yes.
previous meeting, you assigned May 14th as your next meeting.
okay, so we'll have those. We will have had the opportunity to vote on those by that point.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, great.
Dr. Nix, voting on, what are we voting on? What did you say? I'm sorry, I missed that.
I'm sorry, reviewing the changes in the,
Oh, the ICA document,
mhm.
that document that we were just talking about?
Informed consent.
The
Right,
informed
I thought there
consent
was,
document?
but we're also looking at the
Mhm.
rules changes.
Oh, and then the rules changes.
Rules
Right.
changes is what I'm
Oh,
referring
that's what
to.
you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay,
More
okay.
about the rules changes.
Okay. I apologize, I missed that. Okay. Okay, any other agenda items for the next meeting? You can always email Tamala with your ideas. Okay, how about, let's move to the next agenda item K, discussion of date, time, and location of the next board meeting.
Ella Nelson, I won't be here on May 14th. We're going to be in Tennessee, and I thought y'all should know to make sure everybody else is here so we have a forum.
There we go.
May 14th, I'll be here.
It's the first board meeting I've ever missed.
Oh, wow. Can we change?
Maybe.
We'll have a moment of silence. So do we need to schedule the following?
Since we have a
Can I s-
tentative date.
Can I suggest
Dr.
we
Gilliam?
have it near the summit, so it's one trip?
Oh.
I'm just,
I got a halfway nod from Tamala, so I think it's okay. I think it's okay.
something like that.
Okay, that's a
Like
great idea.
This afternoon, and then the next day is
Yeah.
the summit, you'd get more attention and more, we'll all be here already.
Okay.
You can stay with me.
Okay.
Oh, but wait a minute, is that a Monday?
Yes.
Oh,
The 6th is a Monday, the 7th is a Tuesday. That would be
so
the
we could
following
still
day.
do. Mhm.
Yeah. Is that,
Okay.
that work for everybody? Okay, that's a little bit different, but.
Do the
That can
board
work.
meeting after the summit?
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't
In
know.
the-
Morning,
That,
In the
honestly,
afternoon or
that,
the morning?
Our 1 o'clock time?
Well, the reason
I'll
I
do it in
mention
the
that is
morning
because
now.
we're already going to be here, like,
So do it in the morning.
so the thought, if we're
Please.
having a summit on Monday,
Yes.
then
Okay.
the morning might make a better
Tuesday morning,
meeting
so
for
we
don't need-
Tuesday to free
I
up
agree.
that other half day.
Okay.
We
I
don't need
agree.
travel time to get here. We
Okay.
need to get home.
Okay.
Oh, if you could go home.
What
I
time
was
do you
thinking
normally
you'd
start the
be here.
morning board meetings?
9 or 10?
9 or 10? Nine?
Yeah.
okay.
I know, I feel the same way.
What's wrong with 10?
10's a great time.
It's such a great time. There's no traffic.
I don't.
Up to the board.
I
10.
abstain. I have no.
Honestly,
vote.
10 is a
Put it to
sweeter.
vote on the board.
What's that?
Let's put it to a vote on the board.
Okay, great idea.
Okay.
Okay, 9 o'clock? 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock.
1, 2, 3, 4.
And I abstain because I really
You're
don't.
Me too.
abstaining.
I'm
You're abstaining?
Abstaining.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay,
it's
10
kinda like
o'clock,
10.
y'all.
10 o'clock.
Sorry, Helen.
So we have summit on the 6th, and we're looking at most of the day for that. So we'll make
Yeah.
sure we get our timelines for different presentations and things and discussions. And then we have our meeting, normal advisory board meeting on the 7th, but instead of the 1 o'clock, we're looking at 10 a.m.
Okay,
Okay.
great. Okay, is that it? Do we have anything else to schedule? Okay, last public comments. Any public comments? No, we didn't receive any. Okay, meeting's adjourned.